Hi, my name's Amy Travis. I'm a marriage and family therapy associate and licensed clinical alcohol and drug counselor with the Morton Center. And today we're going to be talking about a very important topic in recovery and for families, particularly helping a loved one in recovery, and that's enabling. So we'll start for the next couple slides. We're just going to be really looking at what is enabling. What does it mean? How to kind of start to recognize it in your own behavior and in your own family. So enabling literally means to make possible for something to happen. And enabling could be a healthy dynamic or an unhealthy dynamic. Unfortunately, in substance use situations and in recovery, often what happens is the unhealthy forms. So, unhealthy enabling can be very destructive, but it usually comes from a place of genuine love and concern. And that's really important to recognize. So, as we go through the presentation, if you start to recognize um, yeah, I'm doing some of this, or my loved ones are doing some of this, or I'm enabling myself to have unhealthy behavior. Try to recognize that usually that's coming from a place of care, but it has somehow gotten distorted over time. Some of that kind of distorted ways of behaving is sometimes just how we learn to be with each other. Maybe we grew up seeing a parent enable another parent, or we learned that by enabling others, it felt like it kept them connected to us. By giving them what they were asking for, it kept them around, and that felt like love. So um, just kind of keep that in mind and try to approach this topic from a non-judgmental place, because if you start to judge yourself or judge your family, then it's not going to help stay open to learning something different. Enabling really is doing for others what they can do for themselves or should be able to do for themselves. So it's when one person gets in between another person's actions and the natural consequences of those actions. And that's a really important thing to start thinking about. So if my loved one um, does something that gets him into trouble legally, and I jump in and bail them out of jail, um, and stop the consequence of them spending whatever the time is in jail that that they should be doing, or I jump in and I um, pay legal fees for them so they don't have to, or um, call their boss and say, well, they're just not feeling well today, so that they don't have to deal with the consequence of actually um, talking to their boss themselves about why they're not showing up for work. This is me getting in between them and them feeling the natural consequences of their actions. It's not me putting consequences on them. It's me keeping them from experiencing their consequences. And what this does is it can delay the experience of not just experiencing the consequences themselves, but really grappling with the severity of what's going on. Sometimes enabling shows up as I keep somebody totally separate from their consequences. Sometimes it shows up as I somehow get the consequences to lessen. And, maybe I vouch for them. And so therefore, whatever the consequences was, they still are facing it, but not to the extent that they would have if I hadn't stepped in. Well, if I do that, then it means they're also not facing how serious their predicament really is. And it can actually keep someone in denial for a lot longer than they would be if they actually met those consequences head on. As this last point on this slide points out, part of that denial is because the other person doesn't actually experience their quote unquote rock bottom. They don't really feel the emotional, psychological, physical, spiritual pain of what they're going through until much later. So I have stepped in and I have buffered them from that. And again, that usually comes from a place of I'm scared for them, I love them, I care about them, but it also gets distorted and I start to bear those consequences and keep them from experiencing them. So when this happens, remember earlier I talked about it being, it's like um, that love and help, it starts to get distorted and love becomes fearful and help can turn into attempting to control the other person. And this can be very toxic to everybody in the relationship, to the person who is enabling, to the person who is being enabled, and even to um, the other people in the system who are trying in more healthy ways to help. Um, it can also be toxic to how that healthy help is able to come about. And it keeps everybody stuck in this kind of holding pattern to where um, some very unhealthy family roles will develop around um, one person feeling like they've always got to be the person jumping in and fixing things. They've always got to kind of be in that super adult role, and the other person feels like they always have to be the one asking for help, messing up. They're kind of locked into this kind of kid role, even though it's two adults who should be functioning as equals. So now that we've kind of looked at what enabling is, let's look at how to recognize it. So I've got a couple slides here that are looking at family dynamics that that are potential signs that this is going on. So as we go through here, again, try not to be hard on yourself or hold judgment against yourself or your family. Just kind of observe. If as we go through the next couple slides, if you're like, oh, I found 8 or 9 things that describe what it feels like in my family right now, just take that as information, and then it can help give you some momentum to try to do something different. So some dynamics, again, we talked about denial. Denial can really be very thick and entrenched on both sides of the equation. So enabling keeps the person struggling with substance use locked in this place of not really getting how serious it is, but it also keeps family locked there too, because it kind of it's a way of smoothing things over. Okay, we'll get through this crisis and then we'll get a little period of calm, and in that period of calm I can convince myself, because the human brain has an amazing capacity for denial, so I can convince myself that things are okay. So it kind of keeps us both locked in there. If you find that there's a lot of justification of substance use or justification of just unhealthy stuff in general in the family. So that might look like, oh, well, this is just what college kids do. Or, well, everybody gets drunk every now and then. Or everybody's doing drugs. You just don't know anybody who's doing drugs. So lots of different ways that um, that rationalization can come into play. If there's a lot of avoidance, so this might be avoidance of talking about issues or resolving conflict, avoidance of expressing emotions, or just even avoidance of each other, that might be a sign. Resentment, enabling often leads to a lot of resentment, again, on both sides of the equation. Lots of people that I have worked with struggling with substance use have expressed that resentment towards family for not letting them experience their consequences. You know, that I would have hit my rock bottom a lot sooner if people had just gotten out of the way and let me feel that pain, and then I would have kind of understood where things were. Another really important, and these next 2 points really kind of go together, important sign that enabling is happening is if you're finding that you're prioritizing another person's needs of your own over your own needs. That's not to say that you shouldn't prioritize another person's needs. That's an important part of human relationship, to want to take care of each other and support each other and nurture each other. But if you find that it's being prioritized above your own needs or to the exclusion of your own needs, then that is a problem. That's where one of those distortions comes in. Often you can spot this by looking at your own self-care. So, how are you taking care of yourself physically and emotionally and psychologically and spiritually? And if you find that all of your energy is going into trying to save another person or dig them out of their own hole that they've gotten themselves into, then that may be a sign that you're doing enabling behavior without even recognizing it. So that's a really important thing to just kind of reflect on. What is my self-care like? Where does my energy go, and does some of that come back for me, or does it all pour into other people? So continued signs that enabling might be happening, and we talked about avoiding a little bit ago. So now here's suppressing feelings. So pushing them down, pretending like they're not there, not expressing them. Expressing emotions is healthy. It's getting it out of you, out into the open where you can deal with it. Suppressing means you're shoving it down and acting like it's not there, or that it doesn't have an impact on you. And feelings, emotions can only be suppressed for so long before they will work their way kind of back out, often in very unhealthy ways. Conflict is another thing that often gets suppressed when there's enabling. In fact, sometimes enabling behavior feels like a way to keep conflict suppressed. Okay, if I just pay for this for you, will you then stop yelling at me, and then we won't have an argument? So it's a way of feeling like you're bringing stuff back to a sense of peace or order, but it's not. It's not true peacefulness within a relationship, because that conflict often typically goes unresolved. It's not just that it's suppressed and shoved down, it's that it's not really resolved. I'll be posting another presentation that discusses some points about conflict resolution. So if that's something that kind of resonates with you, then look for that presentation as well. Secrecy is often a sign that there's enabling. So sometimes in families that could look like a parent to a child, don't tell your, so let's say it's a mom, don't tell your dad that that this is happening. You know, don't tell your dad that I'm calling his boss. We'll just let him sleep. So then the child learns that secrecy is a normal, unhealthy secrecy is a normal part of being a family, and that that type of protection is, and quote unquote protection is to is something that they should expect in their relationships growing up. So secrecy, you know, it's important to um, make the difference, especially with kids, the difference between um, like a surprise, like a healthy surprise, like a surprise birthday party or Christmas presents or something like that, and then unhealthy secrets. Secrets keep people sick. Secrets keep enabling happening, keep people in denial. So those kind of secrets are really important to start to shine a light on. Um, Also, this idea of protecting someone, lying to protect another person. Again, that can come from a place of feeling like, um, like you're helping them or like you're loving them, but it's usually ends up not helping at all and not protecting them. One of those forms of protection can come in thinking that, okay, if I somehow, keep this person out of jail or out of the court or out of the newspapers, that I'm not just protecting them, but I'm protecting the family name or our standing in the community or our image or what other people think about us. And so that's something that everybody going through recovery has to think about is, um, now that I'm in recovery, what will people think of this? And what will I say to people about this? Um, that can really feeling for families to feel like you have to protect the way other people see your family, can keep you really stuck in some of these behaviors. So some more family dynamics that are signs of enabling: if there's a lot of blaming or punishing is different from discipline, like guidance based discipline. Punishing might be, uh, I've just bailed you out of jail again and I'm angry, and so now I'm going to punish, even though I didn't have to bail you out of jail, but I chose to, but I'm angry about that, so now I'm going to punish you by not speaking to you for 2 weeks. That would be a sign of, like, an example of that type of punishment. um, Attempts to control, and it's really important to hear and understand that you can't really control another person. We cannot change another person's behavior. The only person's behavior that you can change or even slightly control is your own. But if you find that you are really trying to control other people in your life, that may be pointing to some of this enabling behavior. That may look like taking on responsibility for their behavior or for their emotions. And then, um, so if I'm going to take on responsibility for another person's emotions, then I might also expect to be able to control them and say things like, don't you be angry at me. You don't have any right to be angry. And try to control what they're feeling, as opposed to creating a safe space to co-creating really with them a space to where if they're feeling angry, they can express it. I don't have to take it on as my own feeling, but we can talk about it and we can kind of figure out what if anything needs to be done about it, and move forward in our relationship. So that's taking away that sense of I have to control another person. Placating, which is really people pleasing, saying yes to things when you don't want to, that can be a sign of enabling. And minimizing, which goes along, we talked about avoidance earlier, minimizing often goes along with that. So just pretending like things are not as bad as they are. Um, you know, Sometimes this will show up. It's almost like our brains develop this hierarchy of how bad things could be. So let's say that I had a loved one who was really struggling with alcohol use. And I might say, well, but it's just alcohol. It's not heroin. Alcohol is legal. So how bad can that be? Automatically I've minimized it and I haven't allowed myself to see how damaging and destructive this situation might really be. It might be clear as day, but I've minimized it so much that I'm not really seeing the severity of it. So a couple more signs to look out for. One, and this happens over time, this is a type of a role reversal. Let's imagine that when children were young, little, they were given too much power in the family. Too much, and it's important for children to have the ability to shape family decisions and have their voice heard, and be a part of how family dynamics are shaped and how they shift over time. That's different from children being given more power than the adults in the family system. When that happens, one thing that can happen later, when the children have grown up and now they're adult children, is that there's now this sense in them and in the parents that they have the right to tell you what to do. So then it becomes, you know, I've gotten myself into trouble. Here's what needs to be done. I expect you to do it. So that can be, you know, it can be very challenging. Again, try not to look at this with judgment on yourself or on other people in your family. If that's what's happened, then that's where you are. But now you have the opportunity to choose to do something different. A way that you might spot that particular dynamic is if you have feelings of I've failed as a parent, or even that can go to other types of relationships. So feeling like somehow you have failed another person because you can't stop them from their behavior. So it's important to remember that you can't change another person. They've got to do their work to get themselves into their recovery process. But you have to do your work too. Couple more important dynamics to watch out for that might be signs of that enabling is going on is if there's a lot of fear, and we're going to talk more about that in a little bit. But if there's sometimes enabling happens because you're intimidated or you're bullied, and you feel like the only way to be safe is that you go ahead and you step in and bail them out of whatever's going on, but that might be because you're feeling bullied into that. Everything that we've discussed so far, if you think, kind of step back and you look at it all as a whole, I mean, this is just very chaotic to have even a portion of this going on. So if you experience that, just emotional, some people describe it as a roller coaster. You're just up and down. Things are never just kind of calm and peaceful. That might be a sign of enabling. And if there's chronic stress, which sometimes the chronic stress and the emotional chaos, sometimes it's really hard to recognize that that's even happening because it's become normal. So that can happen out of the minimization that we talked about previously. The more that I say, well, this isn't really that big of a problem, then the more I'm telling myself that what I'm experiencing is normal. So as you start to kind of take a step back and look at the dynamics that are there and look at your own behavior and your own part in things, if you start to become more aware of, yeah, you know what, there actually is a pretty high level of stress in our family, and I just didn't even realize it, then the next step might be to look at what am I doing to kind of enable that stress to keep being present? What am I doing that enables the chaos? So now we're going to look at a couple types of unhealthy enabling. One is fear-based, like we talked about just a little bit ago. That's when you enable, you jump in and rescue out of fear, scared that your loved one's gonna hurt themselves, that you might be afraid that the relationship's gonna end. You know, if I don't jump in and give them what they're asking for or what I think they need in this situation, will they go elsewhere for that same answer? Fear that somehow you caused this in some way. It may be actual intimidation. So in this example, if you don't give me money, I'm going to hurt myself. So when there's threats like that, they need to be taken very seriously. It doesn't mean that you need to give in and do what they're requesting. It may mean that help needs to come from another place. There's guilt-based enabling. So the person struggling with substance use may just flat out blame family for what's going on with them. That's a very common dynamic. So if I can get somebody else to accept responsibility for what I'm doing, it means I can keep doing it and not feel like I have to change anything. It means I always have somebody else that I can point at and say, you're the reason my life is what it is. You're why I turned out this way. Or if you don't do this, if you don't pay my way out of this situation, or if you don't give me money for food, you know, then this bad consequence is going to happen and that'll be your fault too. So just another dynamic to be aware of. Then there's kind of the opposite of that, and there's hope-based enabling, but it's really a false hope. But this can keep families really locked in this dynamic for a long, long time. So this is this kind of hinges on the belief that we're so close to a breakthrough. I'm so close to finding a job. I just need one more day. I just need 2 more weeks of crashing on your couch. And then I will be able to find the job. But then you fast forward and it's been 2 months or 2 years and I'm still right where I was, but I'm still saying the same thing. I'll look for treatment tomorrow. I'll go to treatment tomorrow. I'll call for a therapist tomorrow. I'll go to an AA meeting tomorrow. So that's a way of like, just kicking the can down the road, so to speak, let's just keep moving, doing exactly what we're doing. Nothing's really changing, but we're locked into that stagnation by this sense that we're right on the verge of change. And then another type of unhealthy enabling is victim-based. And that's where the person struggling with substance use paints themselves, they're just the victim of life. So if you lived my life, you would use to. So how can you possibly blame me? How can you possibly say that I should change because my life has been so difficult, so awful? What choice do I have? And so when this is going on, it means when people collude with that way of thinking, then it means that everybody can kind of have a clear conscience. Yeah, you're right. Your life has been really tough. It's not my fault. It's not your fault. It's life's fault. And an area that we see a lot of that type of enabling is when there's been some kind of an accident or a surgery that didn't go well, and there's ongoing pain. And so then, as this example says, well, you remember that accident that I was in? Well, If you had the amount of pain I had every day, you'd use too. It's hard to argue with that. And so again, that means that I stay in victim mode, and I don't ever move out of that and start to really take control or take charge over my own decisions. So I've got a link here to a website where you can read more about these different types of enabling and get some more information on that. So now let's look at, okay, we have talked a lot about how to start to spot enabling, different dynamics around that. So let's talk about, what do you do instead? If you've determined, all right, I'm doing enabling behavior, this is a dynamic that's present in my family. So now you want to shift to something different. You want to shift to truly helping, which enabling is usually not very helpful. So that's another thing to really be very clear about. Unhealthy enabling behavior is not helpful to your loved one or to you, not really. In the moment, it may feel like it because it decreases your anxiety around something, or it temporarily decreases the negative consequences or the negative experience, but in the long run, it is not helpful. So here's a way to think about and start to check in with yourself. Is what I'm doing enabling, or is what I'm doing helping? Enabling is doing something for your loved one that they can do for themselves. Helping is doing something for your loved one that they cannot do for themselves. So that sometimes takes a while to really start to learn the difference between the two. Helping is also not motivated by trying to protect them from the consequences, the natural consequences of their behavior. So let's really kind of think about this enabling versus helping. So here's an example, a simple example of enabling versus helping. So let's say that your loved one has come to the point of deciding, they've discovered for themselves how bad things really are, and they've decided, I really need help. And so they call you and they say, it's time, I'm ready to get treatment. And they say, I have access to a phone. Maybe they're staying at somebody's house, they have a landline, but they don't have a computer and they don't have a smartphone. So they say, can you please find me some phone numbers? I have no way to search for treatment options. Can you get online and can you find some things for me? So if they don't have a way to do that, if they cannot do that for themselves, then you finding some information could be a form of helping. So let's say you do that, and then you call them and you say, I've got the information. Now, if they say, okay, good, can you call them for me? Now it's tipped over into enabling, because you know they have a phone. They have the ability to call because you're talking to them on the phone right then. They didn't have the ability to look up the information for themselves, but they do have the ability to reach out for that help for themselves. So that's just an example of, there's a way that you could help in that situation. You could find some information for them, but then to go further with that and do for them what they can do to make that phone call, that then can kind of tip over into that enabling behavior. So here's some ways to help and not enable. And you'll notice a lot of this is things to stop, things to not do. So stop lying or making any excuses for any of their behavior. Stop doing anything for them that they can do for themselves. So in that previous example, you got the information for them, you helped in that way. Then if they say, can you make the phone call? No, you can do that. You can do that for yourself. Don't rescue. Don't beg for change. Don't scold or lecture or tell them what they should be doing, or give advice when it's not asked for, or beg that they will live their lives in the way that you think they should live their lives. Sometimes there can be a reaction to that of kind of digging in heels and becoming even more resistant to the very change that you're looking for. Stop doing anything that allows their current behavior to continue. A lot of times that will be around money. So if I continue to give money, then I'm continuing to allow certain behaviors to continue. Avoid making threats or ultimatums. And that's different from this next point of setting healthy boundaries. And there's a presentation that we've done. It's up and it's all about boundary setting. So I encourage you to look at that too. Ultimatums are different than boundaries. Ultimatums are they are in themselves a threatening statement or an intimidating statement. Boundaries are different. Get support. So, know that you are not, if you have a loved one who's struggling with this, you are not the only family who's going through this. It can feel that way. And over time, families can often get very isolated because you try so hard to protect your loved one and protect your family and kind of put on this mask to the world that everything's okay. And in the process, it can feel like you kind of get in this very closed off place. It's important to know that you're not alone. And so getting support, go to Al-Anon meetings. The Morton Center has a group called Concerned Persons, and it's for family members to explore these kind of topics. So coming to a group like that, find a therapist, get individual therapy, find family therapy. So lots of different ways of getting support for yourself as you try to shift some of these behaviors. And in the process, talking openly about the changes you're making with your family, with your loved one. So say to your loved one, you might notice that some things are going to be different in our family. I'm going to start setting some boundaries. And I'm going to, along with those boundaries come consequences. And I'm going to really work on upholding them. And so what that will do is it helps to kind of rebuild a sense of reliability and predictability and trust in your family and in yourself, that when I set a boundary, I know I'm going to stick to it. I can trust that I'm going to do that. So when a situation comes my way where I'm being asked to participate in enabling behavior, I can trust that I won't do that. I trust myself. And my loved one will see over and over again that I don't do that. And they may not like it, but they will start to see that they can trust the way that I'm going to show up every time. I'm not going to enable. I'm going to set my boundaries. It's a opportunity for trust to get rebuilt in a relationship. Another way, and this actually helps with trust building as well, but another way to stop enabling is to step out of roles that don't belong to you. So often families will take on, try to be a therapist, try to step in and be a lawyer, or act as if they are law enforcement or drug tester or something like that. If that is something that your loved one needs, that role needs to go to the person whose job that is to do it. So if they if they've been caught doing something and they're supposed to sit in jail for a couple days, it let those people do their job and let your loved one kind of experience that. Let them experience dealing with a lawyer. Let them experience the device that goes on your car that you have to blow into in order to get the car to start. Let them experience that. Those all have a role in the recovery process. This lets you stay in your role of mom or dad or spouse or partner or child. It lets the families kind of come back into their healthy family roles and not have to take on these other jobs. So stopping enabling does not mean that you stop loving. And that's really important, because remember earlier we talked about how love and care can get distorted in this enabling process. Well, stopping enabling actually gives you the opportunity to express your love in a healthy way. It gives the opportunity for that love to actually have a safe place to grow in your family. Stopping enabling does not mean that you have to stop loving. It means that your love can be expressed in a healthy way. And I just say that again, that's such an important point. It can feel, if I stop enabling, then I lose that connection. But it doesn't have to be that way. So when connection, when love, which is so important to a sense of well-being and a sense of a healthy life, when that is freed from this behavior, it gives an opportunity for relationships to heal. I don't have to control or feel like I control another person. I can learn how to just be with them and grow with them and love with them. It can be very, very powerful to learn how to recognize and stop this behavior. And it can help to the recovery process to actually gain momentum. So on both sides of the equation, for your loved one who's struggling with substance use and for families, it can help recovery to get some traction, and then other healthy behaviors kind of start to grow and healthy dynamics start to form. There's less resentment. Can work, if you're working through the steps, you can work on the amends process. Trust can be rebuilt, healthy communication can be developed. So enabling, stopping this one behavior can kind of pave the way for other healthy things to begin to develop. So there's a lot of hope in this. So I appreciate you listening, and I hope that this was helpful. If you'd like more information, you can contact the Morton Center and find out about concerned persons, and find out about the other options that we have for family members to get their own help in your own recovery process. Thank you. Take care.